The sun had just begun its slow descent over the gentle hills of rural Missouri, casting long shadows across the golden fields that stretched behind the small town of Lanes Ferry. Birds chirped lazily from the branches of aging oak trees, and the faint hum of insects filled the air like a familiar lullaby. It was a place where time seemed slower, where neighbors still waved from porches and called each other by name. It was peaceful, predictable, safe. 8-year-old Noah Campbell raced through the backyard of his modest home, his laughter trailing behind him like music on the wind. His dirty blonde hair bounced as he ran, cheeks flushed from the summer heat, his bare feet pounding against the grass. He was chasing a butterfly, utterly enchanted, as if the world had shrunk to that single moment of color and movement. Inside, his mother, Rebecca Campbell, watched from the kitchen window, her lips curled into a tired but content smile. She'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the county hospital, where she worked as a nurse, always on her feet, always needed, always giving. But seeing Noah laugh like that made the exhaustion worthwhile. "Come wash up, sweetheart," she called through the screen door. "Dinner's almost ready." "5 more minutes, Mum," Noah yelled back, his eyes never leaving the butterfly. Rebecca sighed softly. "You say that every time," she whispered with a small laugh, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Pastor Elijah Boone was finishing his evening walk just a few blocks away, his worn Bible clutched in one hand, a gentle smile resting on his face. He passed the Campbell home often. Rebecca had been part of his congregation since Noah was a baby. She had leaned on faith after her husband passed, and though the years had weathered her, her spirit was strong. "God's peace to you, Rebecca," he called out, tipping his straw hat as he passed the front gate. "And to you, Pastor," she replied, grateful for the familiar kindness. That day had started like any other. The sky was clear, the air warm. There was no sign of the storm that would later steal the breath from the lungs of the entire town. At dinner, Noah chatted excitedly about the turtles he'd seen by the river earlier that week, how he was sure he could catch one if he had the right kind of net. Rebecca smiled and reminded him of the rule, never go near the river alone. He nodded, mouth full of mashed potatoes, but his eyes sparkled with a curiosity that couldn't be contained. "Mum, do you think Jesus ever went swimming in a river?" he asked suddenly, eyebrows raised in earnest thought. Rebecca chuckled. "I don't know, honey. Maybe, but I do know he watched over the water and the people in it." Noah nodded, satisfied. "Then he'll watch over me too, right?" Her smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of worry crossing her features. "Yes, baby, always." Outside, clouds had begun to gather on the horizon, dark and slow-moving, almost unnoticed against the fading light. The breeze that had earlier been warm began to shift, carrying with it a weight that settled subtly over the town. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep with his favorite stuffed bear tucked under his arm, Rebecca sat on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the crickets sing. She didn't know why, but her heart felt tight in her chest, like something unseen had just passed through her world. She looked toward the river just beyond the tree line, where the moonlight shimmered on the surface. She whispered a silent prayer, one she hadn't said in years, just in case. Before we continue this incredible journey of faith and survival, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. These are the stories that remind us of life's fragile beauty and of the power that lies beyond what we see. The morning light filtered through thin curtains, brushing softly against the worn wooden floor of the Campbell home. Birds sang outside, and the smell of dew on the grass mingled with the faint aroma of coffee. Rebecca stood in her scrubs, hair pulled back, ready to leave for the hospital. She leaned down and kissed Noah's forehead as he sat at the kitchen table, stirring his cereal distractedly. "You be good for Mrs. Donnelly, okay?" she said, tightening the strap on her bag. "I will," Noah mumbled, his eyes fixed on a drawing he'd made of the river. Rebecca paused. "What's that?" she asked, noticing the winding blue line with stick figures beside it. "It's me and the turtles," he said proudly. "And the river monster, see?" He pointed to a dark scribble in the water. Rebecca smiled, shaking her head. "You and that imagination." "It's not fake," Noah insisted. Walter said there's stuff in that river no one ever sees. She didn't argue. She was already late. Just stay away from the water unless someone's with you. Promise me. I promise, he replied, though his eyes lingered on the picture. Rebecca walked briskly toward her car, waving to Mrs. Donnelly, who stood at her own porch across the street, arms folded, watching the neighborhood like a guardian hawk. "You're leaving him with me today?" Mrs. Donnelly asked as Rebecca got in her car. "If that's okay," Rebecca called back, "I'll be off by 4. Of course, you go save lives. I'll keep an eye on him." By noon, the town of Lanes Ferry moved in rhythm with the heat. Kids rode bikes through cracked sidewalks. The diner served sweet tea and burgers. Radios played old country songs from open windows. At the local church, Pastor Elijah met with a young couple preparing for marriage, offering gentle wisdom and a prayer. But the river was different. Its waters had darkened over the past week, fed by upstream rain that hadn't yet reached their town. It slithered quietly behind the trees, high and restless. Most people didn't notice. It looked the same, still beautiful, still familiar. But Walter Griggs noticed. He always did. Walter, grey-bearded and sun-wrinkled, stood near the riverbank that afternoon, fishing rod in hand, though his focus was on the sky. He had lived near this river all his life. He knew when it changed. "Too quiet," he muttered. Back on the Campbell Street, Noah sat on the front steps with a popsicle melting in his hand. Mrs. Donnelly dozed in a lawn chair, a fan blowing on her face. Noah looked at the trees. The breeze carried a strange scent, wet and earthy, like something buried had been stirred. He looked at his drawing again, the one he'd tucked in his pocket. He wanted to see the turtles. Just for a few minutes. He knew the path behind the backyard led close enough. He wouldn't get in, just look. His shoes scraped the dirt as he stood. He glanced at Mrs. Donnelly, still asleep. The world felt wide and open, like it had called just to him. "I'll be quick," he whispered, walking toward the trees. As he stepped under the shade, the light shifted, turning cooler. The sound of cicadas faded behind him, replaced by the steady, pulsing breath of the river ahead. It was louder than usual, stronger. He didn't go far, just to the edge where the grass gave way to wet sand. He crouched, eyes searching. No turtles, only the rush of the current. But he smiled anyway. It felt like a secret. Just him and the river. Behind him, the wind picked up slightly, whispering through the trees, and somewhere far off thunder grumbled. Noah crouched near the water's edge, watching how the river surged over the rocks. It didn't look the same as before. The current moved faster, more aggressive, like it was alive and restless. The trees lining the bank rustled as a gust of wind passed through, sending a ripple through the tall grass behind him. But Noah was too focused to notice. He stepped a little closer, his sneakers sinking into the damp soil. The ground felt soft, unstable. He didn't care. His eyes scanned the water, hoping to catch a glimpse of a turtle's shell breaking the surface or the flick of a tail beneath the brownish waves. Nothing. "Just a minute," he murmured, half to himself, half to something else. "Then I'll go back." A dragonfly zipped past his face, drawing his gaze for a second. Then came the sound, a low, distant groan, like something large shifting deep within the earth. The water responded. A sudden swell rose, hitting the bank harder than before, sending a small spray across Noah's legs. He stumbled back a step, surprised, but not afraid. Not yet. Then he heard a crack, sharp and quick. He looked down. The patch of soil beneath his left foot had crumbled, giving way to the sloped, muddy embankment beneath. Before he could react, his foot slipped out from under him, and he tumbled forward, arms flailing. His hands grasped at nothing but air and reeds. The moment he hit the water, the cold shocked the breath from his lungs. "Noah!" a voice cried from the trees, faint and desperate, but it was too late. The river swallowed him whole. He thrashed wildly, trying to keep his head above water. The current was merciless, pulling him faster than he could comprehend. Panic erupted in his chest as he spun and bobbed, coughing and choking. The world became a blur of water, sky, and the green canopy overhead. He tried to scream, but the river silenced him. On the bank, Mrs. Donnelly stood frozen in horror. She'd woken just in time to see him fall, her body too slow, her legs too stiff to move in time. Her voice cracked as she shouted for help, but there was no one around to hear her. Noah's small body was carried downstream, his arms reaching, his eyes wide with terror. A branch scraped across his face, leaving a thin red line. He didn't feel it. He felt only the cold, the force, the overwhelming helplessness. "Mom!" he cried once, water filling his mouth as he did. "Help me!" His voice was swallowed by the roar. Further down, the river curved sharply. Debris floated past him. Sticks, leaves, a plastic bottle. A tire half submerged in the water. The storm upstream had already begun its work, swelling the tributaries that fed the Missouri River. Noah was now part of that growing flood, a tiny life lost in something ancient and wild. For a moment, his hand brushed against something solid, a large branch caught on a rock. He grabbed it, clinging with all the strength his trembling arms could offer. His lungs burned, his eyes stung. Above him, the clouds had thickened. The first drop of rain hit his forehead. "I'm sorry, Mum," he whispered, barely able to hear his own voice over the crashing water. He tried to pull himself up, but his grip slipped. The current took him again. Downriver, where the trees thickened and the bank disappeared beneath high water, silence returned, broken only by the rumble of distant thunder. The scream that tore from Mrs. Donnelly's throat was hoarse and broken, carrying a sharpness that split the stillness of the neighborhood. "Help! Someone help! The boy's in the river!" she cried, her voice trembling with age and terror. Her sandals slapped against the wet grass as she stumbled toward the bank, waving her arms, but Noah was already gone from sight. A neighbor across the street, Frank Mercer, dropped his rake and sprinted toward her. "What happened?" he demanded. "He slipped. He fell in. I couldn't get to him," she gasped, her chest heaving. Frank didn't wait. He bolted down the path toward the water's edge, scanning desperately. Nothing but the angry swirl of water and broken reeds. "Call the sheriff!" he shouted. "Now, Mrs." Donnelly turned and ran for the house, nearly tripping on the steps. Her fingers fumbled the phone, shaking as she punched the numbers. By the time Sheriff Calvin Rawlins arrived, a small group had gathered near the river. Word had spread fast, too fast. Within 20 minutes, volunteers were pouring in. Neighbors, church members, local fishermen. A line of cars formed along the roadside. Rain began to fall in slow, deliberate drops. Rebecca was at the hospital when the call came through. The charge nurse found her in the break room, sipping coffee, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. "It's Noah," the nurse said, voice low and urgent. Rebecca stood so quickly her chair toppled behind her. "What about him? What happened?" "There's been an accident." The sheriff said he was seen falling into the river. "They're searching now." The world tilted. Rebecca's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her keys fell from her hand. Her heart pounded in her ears as she ran for the door. By the time she reached the river, her clothes were soaked and her breath was short. Dozens of people were spread out along the banks. Sheriff Rawlins approached her gently, hat in hand. "Rebecca," he said, his voice careful, "we've got search teams in place. Boats on the water. The dogs are on their way. We're gonna find him." Her hands trembled. "He can't swim well. He's just a kid. He was scared of the dark. Why was he even here?" Mrs. Donnelly approached from behind, her eyes red. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I closed my eyes for 1 minute. I didn't think. Rebecca didn't respond. She stared at the river, numb, silent. Somewhere out there was her son, somewhere in that fast, cruel water. Pastor Elijah arrived shortly after, his coat soaked through. He said nothing at first, just stood beside her. Then softly, "He is not alone." Rebecca shook her head. "You don't know that." "I believe it," he said simply. As dusk fell, search boats with spotlights moved slowly through the widening current. Volunteers walked the banks with sticks and flashlights, calling Noah's name. Helicopters circled above. Dogs barked from the woods. The air was filled with motion, noise, desperation. Rebecca paced the bank, calling for her son until her voice cracked. Her shoes were muddy, her hands scraped from falling once, twice, pushing past brambles along the shore. At one point she dropped to her knees and sobbed, her cries swallowed by the sound of the river and rain. "Please," she whispered, "please, God, bring him back." Behind her, Pastor Elijah knelt and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't stop praying," he said, "even now." But all Rebecca could feel was the silence inside her. Noah was gone, and the night was just beginning. Hours passed. The river roared, unrelenting, as if mocking the frantic efforts of those searching its depths. Flashlights cut through the dark like thin blades, and voices still called Noah's name, but with each repetition, hope dimmed. The rain had turned into a cold drizzle, soaking through jackets, hair, and skin. Rebecca stood motionless by the water, her arms crossed tight across her chest, shivering not from the cold, but from something deeper, a breaking inside her soul. Sheriff Rawlins approached quietly. "We've extended the search another 2 miles downstream. Nothing yet." Rebecca didn't look at him. "So he's gone." "We're not stopping," he replied, "but we've got to get people rested, fed. They'll be back out at first light." She exhaled shakily. "You think he's dead?" "I think he's out there," he said, "and we're not done looking." Rebecca stared at the river. It didn't look like the one she used to walk beside with Noah. It looked like a monster. She thought of his drawings, the one with the dark scribble in the water. Her throat tightened. "Where is he now?" she whispered. "Mom?" Rawlins asked. "God, where is he?" Her voice cracked. "All these prayers, all this faith. What good is it if he lets your baby disappear into the dark?" Rawlins said nothing. He placed a hand on her shoulder, gave it a light squeeze, then turned to walk away. Pastor Elijah stood a few paces back, silently watching. When she noticed him, her anger spilled. "Don't say it," she snapped. "Don't you dare tell me he's got a plan. Don't tell me this is part of some holy purpose." "I won't," Elijah said softly. "Then what? What do you say when everything you believe in falls apart?" He stepped closer. "I say I've been there. I say I've questioned him, cursed him, begged him. I say he listened anyway." Rebecca clenched her jaw, fighting the sob rising in her chest. "I'm not strong like you." He looked at her with sadness. "That's not strength. That's survival." The wind blew harder, sending leaves dancing through the air. Rebecca looked up, tears cutting lines down her cheeks. "I used to pray with Noah every night. I told him Jesus would protect him. I made him believe that. I believed that." Elijah knelt beside her. "Then don't stop." She shook her head violently. "I can't. Not now." He didn't push. He didn't preach. He simply sat with her in silence, letting the weight of grief settle around them like fog. In the stillness, Rebecca's mind drifted to when Noah was 3, sick with a fever so high it scared her beyond reason. She had held him all night, whispering scriptures, begging for mercy. He recovered. She believed it was a miracle. That memory had been her anchor. But now she felt adrift, untethered. Down by the water, a volunteer slipped in the mud, cursed, and got back up. The search had not stopped, but the voices calling Noah's name had grown fewer. More whispers now, more prayers murmured under breath. Rebecca's legs gave out. She dropped to her knees, her hands pressed into the wet ground. She didn't cry this time. She just stared into the black current. "I gave you everything," she whispered. Wasn't that enough? Behind her, Elijah placed his hand on her back, steady and firm, not pushing, not pulling, just there. The river moved on, cold and wide, indifferent to the desperation clinging to its banks. By dawn, the entire town had become an extension of the river, flowing with urgency, filled with purpose, each person moving as if Noah were their own. The streets buzzed with quiet coordination. Trucks delivered bottled water, blankets, and food. Volunteers arrived with waterproof boots and maps. The air smelled of mud, diesel, and wet leaves. Inside the church hall, tables were covered in walkie-talkies, first aid kits, and printed maps of the river's winding path. Sheriff Rawlins gave instructions while wiping sleep from his eyes. "We'll split into 3 zones. North Bend, Main Fork, and Lowlands. Stay in pairs. No one goes alone." Rebecca sat in a corner, arms wrapped around herself. She hadn't slept. Her face was pale, her lips dry. Yet every time someone walked in the door, she looked up as if he might somehow just appear. Walter Griggs leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp under his ball cap. His weathered skin bore the stories of a lifetime spent on the water. "I told him this river wasn't done yet," he muttered. "It's got a hunger to it right now. Ain't natural." Rawlins nodded. "You said she rises fast." "She rises like a lie," Walter replied. "Quiet, sneaky, and deadly." Pastor Elijah joined Rebecca, offering her a fresh cup of coffee. She took it with trembling hands, not out of thirst, but just to have something to hold. "Why are they all here?" she asked quietly. He followed her gaze, people pouring in with supplies, kids holding posters, older women making sandwiches. "Because they believe in something bigger than fear," Elijah said. Mrs. Donnelly approached slowly. "I know I can't undo what happened. But if there's any way I can help." Rebecca met her eyes, saw the guilt behind them. She nodded once. "Find him." The search expanded beyond the immediate banks. People waded into side channels, checked under bridges, climbed into canoes. Helicopters circled again, this time with thermal imaging. Walter joined a search boat with 2 younger men, guiding them toward a place he called the Ben's Elbow. He said if the boy was anywhere, it might be there. "This river don't just take," he said. "Sometimes it gives back." At the church, phones rang non-stop. News stations had picked up the story. Reporters hovered outside, whispering into microphones. Rebecca ignored them all. A teenage boy named Cody, one of the youth group kids, approached her nervously. He held something small in his hand. "I found this near the path by the river," he said. "It looked like something Noah might have dropped." It was a drawing, soggy, smeared, but still visible. The blue line of a river, 2 stick figures. One had a glowing circle around its head. Rebecca pressed it to her chest. "Thank you." The storm clouds had not cleared, but the rain paused. The sun tried to push through, casting soft light across the soaked fields. Birds began to sing again, cautiously. At noon, a woman arrived from the next town with a crate of dry clothes. "I didn't know him," she told Rebecca, "but I have a son. I had to come." Rebecca nodded, her voice gone. Somewhere by the river, Walter's voice rose over the radio. "Got something here, might be nothing, might be something. Branches tangled in the current." Rawlins grabbed his gear and ran. Back at the church, Rebecca closed her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't let it be a body." Noah drifted. The current had dragged him for miles. His limbs were too tired to resist now. His body moved with the water like a leaf, bumping against debris, scraping past submerged branches. His eyes were half open, blinking slowly as the sky above flashed in and out of view between the canopy of trees. He didn't know how long it had been. Time had become strange, disconnected. His chest ached, his arms felt numb. Sometimes his face slipped under the water for seconds before he could push himself back up. He wasn't scared anymore. He was quiet, cold. He thought about the turtles, about the story Walter once told him, how the river had its own memory, how sometimes it held things tight and sometimes it let them go. Noah didn't want to be held, he wanted to go home. A log floated near him and he reached for it. His fingers brushed the rough bark, and with effort he pulled himself partway onto it. It didn't hold much of his weight, but enough to keep his face above water. His cheek pressed against the wood, his breathing shallow. "I want my mum," he whispered, barely audible over the sound of rushing water. Then, something shifted. The current slowed. The water, once loud and furious, seemed to hush around him. A warmth touched his face, though the air was still cold. Noah blinked, and for a moment he thought he saw light beneath the surface, like sunbeams, but softer, gentler, as if glowing from within the water itself. A hand reached toward him. It wasn't wet, it wasn't rough like branches or rope. It was warm, steady, and strong. It touched his back lightly, then under his arms, lifting, not pulling, but holding. Noah didn't panic, he didn't cry out. Somehow he knew. "You're not alone," a voice said. He couldn't tell if it was out loud or inside him. It sounded familiar and strange at the same time. deep but tender, like someone who had known him forever. His body stopped moving with the current. He was being held, gently, as if the water itself had become arms. Noah's head lolled slightly to the side. He saw a face, but not in the way he saw people. It wasn't made of flesh and bone, but light, radiant, calm. Eyes that didn't just look at him, but into him. "Are you an angel?" Noah asked, his voice barely a breath. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it smiled. He felt the warmth spread through his chest, down his arms into his fingertips. The cold faded, the fear dissolved. The light grew brighter, surrounding him. "I want to go home," he whispered. "You will," the voice replied. And then it was gone. The light, the warmth, the hand, all vanished like mist in sunlight. But something lingered inside him, a stillness, a peace he didn't understand. The current had brought him into a slow backwater, where trees bent low and branches reached down like fingers. The log bumped against the muddy edge, catching in a tangle of vines and roots. Noah didn't move. He lay there, barely conscious, his breath shallow but steady, his small hands gripping the bark. Above, the clouds parted briefly. Sunlight touched the river's surface like a promise. Night returned, heavy and breathless. Inside the church hall, the energy had shifted. People spoke in murmurs now. The floodlights outside hummed as volunteers came and went, exhaustion etched into their faces. Rebecca sat alone near the altar, Noah's damp drawing clutched in her hand. Her clothes were still wet from the riverbank, her fingers numb, her heart hollow. She hadn't cried in hours. She was past crying. Elijah sat across the room, watching over her like a silent guardian. He knew not to speak. Some grief required stillness. Rebecca looked up at the stained glass window above the altar. It showed Jesus reaching for a lamb caught in thorns. She stared at it for a long time, her lips slightly parted. Then slowly she stood. She walked past Elijah without a word, out into the dark. The air was sharp with the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. She crossed the field behind the church, her shoes sinking into the mud, until she reached the riverbank again. The river was calmer now, but its surface gleamed like oil in the moonlight, mysterious, unreadable. Rebecca knelt down. Her knees sank into the cold soil, but she didn't move. She looked out over the water, silent for several minutes. Then she spoke. "I don't know if you're there. I don't even know if I care anymore." The wind stirred the grass behind her. "I gave you my heart when my husband died. I gave you my son. I said you could guide his life, that you'd protect him." Her voice shook. "I told him to trust you. I told him you'd never leave him." She covered her face with both hands, breathing hard. Her shoulders trembled. "I should hate you. I should walk away. But I can't, because if I stop believing, I have nothing." She lowered her hands. "So, I'm making you a vow. If you bring my boy back to me, however you choose, I'll give you the rest of my life, all of it, every breath. I won't doubt you again. I won't hold back." Her voice broke. "Just bring him back, please." The moon slipped behind the clouds, casting everything into a deeper shadow. Rebecca sat in the quiet. Then, out of nowhere, an overwhelming sense of stillness fell over her. Not peace, not comfort, just stillness, like the world had paused for one breath. She felt her chest rise slowly, as though something unseen had placed a hand over her heart to calm it. She whispered one last word. "Please." Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned. It was Walter, holding a flashlight and his soaked fishing hat. "They're pulling back search teams for the night," he said gently. "Sheriff says they'll restart at first light." Rebecca nodded. "I figured I'd stay a while longer," he added, glancing at the river. "This old girl still has secrets to tell." They stood together in silence. Then Walter said something strange. "You ever hear a river sing?" Rebecca looked at him, puzzled. "I have. Not often. But sometimes in the quiet it ain't just water. It's like the whole world's whispering something underneath it." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She turned back toward the church, feeling lighter somehow, though nothing had changed. But something inside her had shifted. She had given her vow. And something inside her believed, truly believed, that the river hadn't had the last word. At first light, a sharp breeze swept over Lanes Ferry, clearing the fog that had lingered all night. The sky, once a curtain of dark grey, broke open in streaks of gold and pale blue. The town awoke with a new urgency, less panic now, more resolve. Sheriff Rawlins gathered the search teams near the water's edge, eyes bleary but focused. "We cover every foot from the bend to the mill road. Boats, canoes, foot teams, let's move." Rebecca stood near the back, her hands jammed in her pockets. She hadn't slept, but she felt different, anchored by something quiet that hadn't been there before. She didn't understand it, but she held on to it. Walter stood beside her, chewing a toothpick. "Today feels different," he muttered. She looked at him. "You think he's still alive?" He shrugged. "I think miracles don't come wrapped in logic." About 30 minutes into the renewed search, one of the volunteers, a teenager named Eric, pointed toward a tangled mass of branches near a wide curve in the river. "Something caught in there," he yelled. Walter and 2 others paddled toward it in a flat-bottomed boat. The branches looked like a messy driftwood trap, thick with vines and debris. The boat rocked slightly as they reached it. "There," Walter said, pointing to a pale shape among the brush. Eric's breath caught. "Is that a—" Walter raised a hand. "Don't say anything yet." He leaned over the edge, gripping one of the thicker branches to steady himself, then reached down slowly, carefully parting the vines. A small hand. He stopped breathing. Then, movement. The hand twitched. "He's alive!" Walter shouted, his voice ragged. "Get the med bag!" The boat erupted in urgency. One man radioed the sheriff. Walter pulled his jacket off and gently slid it under the boy's head. Noah's face was pale, lips slightly blue, but his chest rose and fell. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused. "You hang on, son," Walter whispered. "You hang on," the sheriff's voice came through the walkie. "Say that again?" "We found him. He's breathing, down at the elbow." Chaos followed. Ambulances raced to the site. Searchers ran through mud and underbrush. When Rebecca arrived, she didn't run, she couldn't. Her legs moved without her as if her soul had taken the lead. She saw the boat, the crowd around it, people shouting instructions. Then she saw him, wrapped in a space blanket, cradled in Walter's arms, eyes closed again, but breathing. Rebecca's knees buckled. Someone caught her, but she pushed forward, stumbling into the water, reaching him. "Noah," she gasped. He stirred at the sound of her voice. "Mom?" Her sob came so violently it took her breath. She grabbed his hand, pressing it to her face. "I'm here. I'm right here." He tried to smile, but his lips barely moved. "I saw him," he whispered. "Don't speak," the EMT said gently, checking his vitals. "We need to move him now." They carried him up the bank, Rebecca walking beside the stretcher, holding his fingers. Walter stood back, his arms crossed, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. Elijah approached him. "You found him?" "No," Walter said. "Something else did. We just showed up." Rebecca rode in the ambulance, never letting go of Noah's hand. She didn't know what came next, what damage the river had done to his body, to his mind, but none of that mattered in this moment. He was alive, and the storm had finally broken. The hospital room was quiet, filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the steady rhythm of Noah's breathing. The color had returned to his cheeks. An IV ran gently into his arm, and warm blankets were tucked up to his chin. Rebecca sat by his side, her fingers still wrapped around his small hand, unwilling to let go. Dr. Matthews entered the room with a clipboard in hand, his brow furrowed more in disbelief than concern. "I've been in medicine 23 years, he said, "and I've never seen anything like this." Rebecca stood. "What do you mean?" "Given the temperature of the water, the time he spent in it, and the conditions, he should have severe hypothermia, organ stress, possibly brain trauma. But his scans are clear, his lungs are fine. He has a few scratches, mild dehydration, that's it." She stared at the doctor, trying to comprehend. "He's perfectly fine?" she asked. "Medically?" Matthews nodded. Yes, physically, this boy is a miracle. That word echoed in her chest. Later that afternoon, local news vans gathered in front of the hospital. The town's story had caught fire. Headlines used phrases like divine intervention and boy survives impossible ordeal. One reporter cornered Sheriff Rawlins just outside. How do you explain what happened, Sheriff? He looked at the cameras, hesitant. We're just grateful he's home safe. But do you believe it was a miracle? Rawlins paused. I believe the river's never given back what it took, until now. Back in the room, Rebecca sat beside Noah as he woke again, blinking up at the ceiling lights. Hey, baby, she whispered, brushing his hair back. You're okay. You're safe. He looked at her sleepily. You came. I never stopped. He smiled faintly. I wasn't scared at the end. She hesitated. What do you mean? I thought I was going to sink, he said, his voice quiet. Then someone grabbed me. Her heart skipped. Someone? He was bright. Not like normal bright. He glowed. And he talked to me. Rebecca's eyes widened, breath caught in her throat. What did he say? He said I wasn't alone, Noah replied. And he smiled. He had a beard. His hands were warm. I think he was Jesus. Rebecca's hands trembled. He held me in the water. He didn't let me go. She pressed her forehead to his, tears falling freely now. I believe you, she whispered. Pastor Elijah arrived soon after. When Rebecca told him, he didn't question a word. Children see what we've forgotten how to, he said. By nightfall, news of Noah's account spread through the community. Some dismissed it as a hallucination, a dream, a child's wild imagination in a moment of trauma. Others believed completely. In the town diner, old men nodded solemnly over coffee. He saw the Lord, one said. That river's never let go of anything before. At the church, people lit candles. At the school, teachers told students that sometimes even science has no answers. Rebecca sat alone in the hospital room that night, watching Noah sleep peacefully. She thought about every prayer she'd ever whispered, every doubt she'd shouted into the sky. She didn't have all the answers, she probably never would, but she knew one thing now with certainty. Her son had been gone and something holy had brought him home. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting golden shapes across the foot of Noah's bed. Rebecca was already awake, sitting beside him with a sketch pad and crayons in her lap. Noah had asked for them as soon as he'd opened his eyes. I need to draw him before I forget, he said. He gripped the crayon tightly in his small hand, tongue sticking out slightly as he focused. He moved slowly, pausing between lines, glancing into the distance as if replaying something sacred in his mind. Rebecca watched in silence. When he finished, he held up the page. The figure was simple, a man with a beard, a robe, and a kind smile. But it wasn't the face that caught her breath. It was the hands. Noah had drawn circles on each one. Not gashes, not blood. Just two glowing marks. Rebecca swallowed hard. Was that what his hands looked like? She asked softly. Noah nodded. They had light coming out. It didn't hurt to look at it. It made me feel warm. Pastor Elijah entered a few minutes later, carrying a worn leather Bible and a bag of fruit. He paused when he saw the drawing. He told me he loved me, Noah said, turning to Elijah. He said I didn't have to be afraid even when I thought I was alone. Elijah sat down slowly. That's exactly what Jesus says in Scripture. Noah leaned back against his pillow, suddenly looking very small. He knew my name. He didn't ask it. He just knew. Rebecca's hand reached for her chest. The pastor turned to her. You see why I believe him? She nodded, blinking back tears. A nurse entered, checking Noah's vitals. She glanced at the sketch and froze. I'm sorry, she whispered. That looks just like the stained glass in the chapel. Noah tilted his head. Does he have those marks there too? The nurse smiled gently. Yes, on both hands. News of Noah's vision spread quickly through the hospital. Doctors passed the drawing from one to another. Some shook their heads with polite skepticism. Others said nothing at all. By the end of the day, the hallway outside Noah's room was filled with flowers, cards, and small notes. One card simply read, "Your faith reminded me how to pray again." A reporter from the local paper requested an interview. Rebecca declined. This wasn't a story to her. It was sacred, and it belonged to Noah. That evening, as twilight deepened outside, Elijah returned with his Bible open. "Do you want to read something together?" he asked. Noah nodded. Elijah began, his voice deep and steady. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers they shall not overwhelm you." Isaiah 43:2. Noah closed his eyes, a small smile on his lips. When the pastor left, Rebecca kissed her son's forehead. "Do you remember anything else?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. Before he left, he said one more thing. "What was it?" He said, "Tell them I'm still here." Rebecca pressed her lips to his hand, her heart full, her chest rising with the first peaceful breath she'd taken in days. That night, she didn't sleep in the chair. She curled up beside Noah in the narrow hospital bed, arms around him, drawing him close. He didn't need to say more. The message had already reached farther than either of them could imagine. The following morning, Lanes Ferry woke to a different kind of tension. The miracle had drawn attention, far beyond what anyone expected. A van from Channel 6 News arrived first, followed by 2 national outlets. They parked near the hospital, set up cameras, and asked questions with polite persistence. Rebecca kept Noah away from it all. Inside his hospital room, sunlight touched the corners gently, and he played with modeling clay while humming quietly. It was as if nothing could shake him now. The peace in his eyes was unshakable, even when the world outside buzzed with skepticism. One of the reporters, a woman named Jessica Miles, requested a meeting with Rebecca. At first, she refused, but Pastor Elijah convinced her otherwise. "Let her ask," he said. "The truth doesn't need defense, it only needs presence." They met in a small conference room on the hospital's 2nd floor. Jessica had a kind smile, but there was a sharpness behind her eyes. "I want to tell this story truthfully," she began, "but you have to understand. It's hard to convince people a child was held by Jesus in a river." Rebecca folded her arms. "I'm not asking anyone to believe. I'm just telling what my son experienced." Jessica opened a notebook. Noah was in the river for over 30 hours. Most experts say that's incompatible with survival, especially without lasting injury. Rebecca didn't flinch. "That's exactly why I believe it was God." Jessica hesitated. "Do you think Noah was hallucinating?" Rebecca leaned forward. "Do you think a hallucination would leave a child more calm than he's ever been in his life?" Jessica blinked. Downstairs, another reporter spoke with Dr. Oayue. Matthews off the record. "Honestly," the doctor said, "we were preparing for trauma, but when he came in, it was like he'd just taken a long nap. I don't have a file to compare this to." "And the boy's story?" Matthews hesitated. "Some things aren't ours to explain." That afternoon, the search team captain visited the hospital. He brought back Noah's jacket, recovered from a tangle of roots nearly 2 miles from where the boy had been found. Inside the pocket was a small, soaked paper, the crayon drawing of the glowing man. It hadn't fallen apart. Elijah held it in his hands later that evening. Faith doesn't always defy logic. Sometimes it completes it. Rebecca nodded, exhausted but resolute. "People can say what they want. I know what happened." At the town diner, the debate was louder. "It was luck," one man insisted. "A warm current, a bit of shelter, that's all." "Luck doesn't give you glowing handprints," countered another. "That boy saw something." Walter sat at the bar, sipping black coffee. When someone asked his opinion, he shrugged. "I pulled that kid out myself. His skin was cold, yeah, but his face, that boy wasn't scared. He looked protected." Back in the hospital, Noah asked his mother quietly, "Why don't they believe me?" She kissed his forehead. "Because they didn't see what you saw. But that doesn't change what's true." He smiled. I still remember his voice. What did it sound like? Like wind in the trees, but with words. The next day, Jessica Miles published her article. It wasn't a critique, it wasn't even an argument. It was titled, "He Said He Wasn't Alone. One Boy's Miracle in the River." Weeks passed, and the story of Noah's survival settled into the fabric of Lanes Ferry, like a song everyone hummed quietly but couldn't forget. Life returned to something close to normal, but for Rebecca and Noah everything had shifted. There was an unspoken reverence in the way they moved through their days, a gentle awareness of miracles in the mundane. Noah returned to school slowly, escorted by Walter and Pastor Elijah on the first day back. Children crowded around him, eyes wide with awe, whispers trailing after him like a soft current. "Did you really see him?" one classmate asked. Noah nodded, quietly, a calm certainty in his gaze. "I did. He was kind. He said I wasn't alone." The words hung in the air. Some kids whispered in disbelief, others stared, thinking maybe they should believe too. Noah didn't need anyone's validation. The experience had anchored him in a way nothing else ever could. At home, Rebecca found herself more attentive, more deliberate in her prayers, no longer whispering them out of habit, but with intention and gratitude. She began volunteering at the church, helping organize meals and visits for the elderly. Every task, every interaction became a form of devotion. She felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known since her husband died. Noah, for his part, had grown quieter in a thoughtful way. He still loved exploring outdoors, still chased butterflies and turtles, but he spoke often of the warmth he felt in the river and the peace of being held. He would pause in the middle of play, look to the sky and whisper, "I remember." He's still there. At the river, the bend where he had been found remained a sacred place. Rebecca and Noah would visit every Sunday morning. Noah would stand at the edge of the water, arms outstretched, closing his eyes. Rebecca would kneel beside him, her hands pressed together, murmuring prayers of thanks. The river had given back what it took, and in that simple act both mother and child felt a profound sense of connection to something beyond comprehension. Even Pastor Elijah noticed the change. During Sunday service, he called Noah forward to lead a short prayer. The congregation held their breath as the boy's voice carried across the chapel. "Thank you for keeping me safe," he said clearly. "Even when the water was strong, I was not alone." The congregation was quiet, eyes glistening with tears. It was more than a statement. It was a declaration of faith restored, of hope renewed. Across town, news had quieted, but the ripple effects persisted. Families spoke of miracles in hushed tones. Neighbors offered more help to one another, and children, inspired by Noah, carried small acts of kindness into their daily routines. Walter often sat on the porch with Rebecca, watching the river and sharing stories of its unpredictable ways. "You know," he said one evening, "I've fished these waters my whole life. But after what happened, I look at it different. Ain't just a river anymore, it's a reminder." Rebecca smiled softly. "It's a reminder that life is fragile, and sometimes faith can carry us through." Noah would run past, calling out to the neighbor's dog or pointing at a turtle, and Rebecca would watch him, chest tight with gratitude. The terror of the river, the hours of panic, the sleepless nights, they had all been real, but so had the rescue, the warmth and the life restored. In quiet moments, Rebecca often thought back to that night she knelt at the riverbank. Her vow had been answered. Every beat of Noah's heart was a testament to that promise. And in the town, though most couldn't explain it, everyone who knew the story understood one thing clearly. A miracle had passed through Lanes Ferry, leaving behind not just a boy, but a community changed forever. Word of Noah's survival spread beyond Lanes Ferry like wildfire. By the second week, emails, letters and phone calls arrived from across the country. Strangers shared stories of despair, illness and loss, and how Noah's story had given them hope. Some wrote simply, "Your faith reminded me to keep praying." Others detailed lives that had changed after hearing of the miracle. The local news coverage expanded into national interviews. Reporters asked Rebecca and Pastor Elijah countless questions, but the answer was always the same. They could only speak to what they had seen and felt. Noah's experience could not be fully explained, only witnessed. A woman named Maria called one evening. She explained she had been considering ending her life, overwhelmed by grief and isolation. She had read the story online, about a child held safe by unseen hands, and something inside her had shifted. "I watched him speak," Maria said, her voice trembling over the phone. "And I realized I am not alone. I can still hold on." Rebecca and Pastor Elijah listened quietly, offering gentle words of encouragement. It was a profound reminder. The story was larger than just one boy and his mother. It carried hope to the far reaches, touching lives they would never meet. Back in Lane's Ferry, children began to draw their own pictures, depicting glowing hands, kind faces, and unseen protectors. Teachers used the story in lessons about faith, courage, and resilience. Noah's survival became part of the town's narrative, a symbol of unwavering hope. Walter, too, noticed the ripple. He sat on the dock, watching the river twist and turn as he fished. "Funny," he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else, "how one little life can make a whole world see differently." Noah, now fully recovered, began to share small pieces of his story with classmates. He spoke cautiously, gently, never exaggerating, but his words were powerful. Each listener felt something stir inside them, a mixture of awe, respect, and faith renewed. Teachers reported that even children who were quiet or withdrawn began to show confidence and curiosity again. Meanwhile, the church organized special Sunday sessions for visitors from neighboring towns. People would come just to hear Rebecca and Noah speak, to see the boy who had survived impossible odds. Pastor Elijah often reminded everyone, faith is strongest not in what we see, but in what holds us when we cannot see. Letters continued to pour in. Some described miracles of their own, a patient recovering unexpectedly, a family reconciled after years of silence, someone finding a job after months of struggle. All credited the story of Noah as inspiration to believe, to hope, to act. Rebecca reflected on all of it quietly, sitting on her porch with her son beside her. Noah handed her a new drawing, a small river, a pair of glowing hands, and a family together. She hugged him tightly. "You remember," she whispered. "I do," Noah said simply. "I'll never forget." Even in their ordinary routines, small miracles continued. Neighbors helped neighbors more readily, children played more carefully and kindly. People prayed more openly, encouraged by the visible evidence of a life saved beyond reason. And still the river flowed, unchanged in its currents, mysterious and powerful. But now it carried not only danger, but also a story of hope, passed down to anyone willing to listen. Rebecca looked at Noah and thought, life is fragile, and miracles come quietly, sometimes when we least expect them. And sometimes the world shifts, not because we force it, but because faith and love persist. The story was far from over. It had already traveled beyond the town, beyond the river, touching hearts in ways they could not have imagined. 1 year had passed since the river had claimed Noah and then returned him. The town of Lane's Ferry had changed subtly, as though the very air remembered the miracle. Rebecca and Noah stood at the riverbank, the early morning light scattering across the water, turning it into a ribbon of gold and silver. Noah's hand slipped into his mother's, small fingers gripping hers tightly. "I like coming here," he said softly. "It feels safe now." Rebecca nodded, eyes glistening. "It's always safe when we remember he's here." The river flowed steadily, whispering past trees and reeds, carrying the memories of the ordeal along its currents. Noah gazed at the water, recalling the warmth, the light, the gentle strength that had held him above the fear and the chaos. That presence hadn't left him. It had never left. Rebecca knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Do you remember what you promised him?" she asked. He nodded. "To trust. To never forget." She smiled through her tears. "And you've kept it." Walter stood a few yards away, leaning on his old fishing pole, eyes scanning the river. "You know," he said, more to himself than anyone else, "I've fished this river my whole life. Never thought it'd teach me about hope." Pastor Elijah approached, Bible tucked under his arm. "Sometimes," he said, The lessons are carried by water, not words. Noah looked up at him, thoughtful. I feel like I learned more there than anywhere else. Even now, I know I'm never alone. Rebecca held his shoulders gently. That's right. Even when things seem dark, he's never left you. As they watched, birds rose from the water's edge, their wings catching the sunlight. The town began to stir behind them, children running towards school, neighbors waving, life resuming its rhythm. Yet beneath the ordinary, a quiet reverence remained, a subtle understanding that miracles were not only possible, they were present. The story of Noah had traveled far, but its heart always returned to the river, to the boy, and to the mother who had never stopped praying. Letters and messages continued to arrive, people sharing how one child's survival had changed their own outlook, giving courage to face impossible moments. Rebecca turned to Noah, brushing her hands over his shoulders. "Promise me something," she said. "Keep sharing your story. People need to hear it just like we did." "I will," he said confidently, "even when it's hard to believe." Pastor Elijah rested a hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "Your faith, your courage, they've shown everyone what true hope looks like." Walter nodded. "Ain't just hope, it's proof." Noah skipped ahead a few steps, picking up a small rock and tossing it into the water. The splash rippled across the river's surface, joining the endless flow. He turned and looked back at his mother, a quiet smile on his face. "I saw him, Mom, and I still do." Rebecca hugged him tightly, inhaling the fresh, crisp air, feeling the miracle she had promised to honor. "I know, baby, I know." As they walked back toward the town, the river glimmered in the sunlight. The memory of fear, the hours of desperation, the nights spent praying alone, it all seemed part of the same story, bound together by grace. And it was far from over. To those who listened carefully, who believed quietly or loudly, the echo remained. Even in the deepest currents of life, something unseen was holding them, guiding them, protecting them. And the promise of miracles lingered, waiting to be recognized, waiting to return home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more true stories of hope and miracles. And don't forget, click on the next video on your screen to continue this journey of faith. Because every story, like the river, carries life forward, carrying light where darkness once seemed endless. The river flowed. Noah held his mother's hand, and life, fragile and magnificent, continued, awash with hope and the enduring presence of something far greater than anyone could see.